Okay, so let's unpack this source material we have on Somalia's national dialogue process. We're really going to dive into a pretty critical moment here,
Right.
looking at big questions, authority, legitimacy, and the really tricky path towards universal suffrage.
Right. And this political update we're using, it lays out what's been happening recently, and it outlines the government's proposed steps forward. It really helps clarify who's involved. And maybe more importantly, according to this source, who actually has the mandate to make the final calls.
Okay, so the scene starts with President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed inviting stakeholders to a national dialogue. Sounds positive, right? Getting everyone around the table.
It definitely seems that way on the surface.
Yeah.
And initially, this political platform, Madasha Somalia, group advocating for certain political views, they actually welcomed that invitation. That was back on June 1st.
Ah, okay. But then the source points out this pretty sharp turn just 9 days later, June 9th. Madasha dramatically rejects the exact process they'd seemed okay with just days before.
Yeah, it's quite the reversal. And the source we're looking at interprets this sudden move. Well, it frames it as potentially part of a recurring tactic, sort of, supporting reform, but only when it looks like it's going their way, and then rejecting it if it doesn't seem to align with their terms.
So the big question the source seems to be grappling with is, well, was their initial yes really about contributing? Or was it maybe more about trying to control the outcome? At least that's the perspective in this update.
And the update tries to cut through some of that confusion by really clearly laying out the government's proposed timeline. It offers a structure.
Okay, yeah, I see two key dates here. First up is June 15th, 2025. On that day, the president's planning consultations, registered political parties, CSOs, and former national leaders too, ex-presidents, prime ministers, speakers, that group.
Exactly. But here's a really critical point the source emphasizes about that June 15th meeting. While these groups are definitely invited, their role is explicitly advisory. They're there to share their views, raise concerns, sure, but crucially, not to make binding decisions. That's key.
Got it. Advisory only on the 15th. Then comes the second date, June 22nd, 2025. That's when the National Consultative Council, the NCC, is set to convene.
Right. And the source explains who makes up the NCC. Presidents of all the federal member states, the governor of Banadier, and the current sitting federal government. What's really significant here, according to the source, is that this body is identified as the one holding the constitutional mandate. That's where national policy decisions based on legality are actually meant to be made.
Okay, so let's really break down these roles and the authority structure based on the source material. Registered political parties, they're presented as, like the future actors, right? The legal players designed to contest elections, push policy within the system.
Then you have CSOs, civil society organizations, described as essential watchdogs, vital for citizen interests, accountability. But the source is very clear. They hold no constitutional authority. They can't make or block national policy decisions legally.
And the former national leaders. Valuable experience, historical perspective, absolutely. But unless they're actually in office now, their role in this specific process, as the source outlines it, it's purely advisory, just like the CSOs and parties on the 15th.
And the source then really hammers home the point about who holds the ultimate sovereign legal mandate. It's the Federal Parliament of Somalia. They're the institution elected by the people. And only Parliament, constitutionally speaking, can pass laws, amend the Constitution, and fundamentally define the whole political system.
Which brings us neatly to what the source says about the public reaction. Apparently, citizens are starting to ask, well, why should former officials, people without a current elected mandate, why should they seem to dominate these national decisions, operating outside the defined legal channels?
Yeah, it raises that question, as the source implies. Is this push really about genuine inclusion? Or is it more about trying to exert influence without accountability? People want dialogue, sure, the source says that. But they also want a vote that actually means something. They want decisions from their elected leaders, not feeling pressured by former power holders.
Right. So the source really highlights this structure: constitutional authority versus advisory roles, the government's timeline, and its interpretation of what the alternative looks like.
Exactly. The source basically boils it down to two potential paths for Somalia right now.
Path 1. The government's proposed process. Dialogue with everyone on the 15th, leading into formal legal decisions by the constitutionally mandated body, the NCC, on the 22nd. The source frames this as the inclusive, legal, transparent way forward, building towards that one person, one vote goal.
And path 2, the alternative, which the source suggests Madasha's rejection might represent, is essentially staying stuck. trapped in that old cycle of elite back-and-forth pressure tactics, what the source bluntly calls political theater.
And the source is really unambiguous here. Only the federal parliament, elected by the Somali people, only they have the actual constitutional power to decide Somalia's future political system. So Madasha's rejection, in this light, is framed as them stepping back from a chance to move towards a more structured legal process.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with this final thought to consider. Which path is Somalia really on today? Is it building that legal, inclusive future through these defined processes? Or is there a risk of getting pulled back into that familiar cycle of elite influence and negotiation?
According to this source, the Somali people are watching very closely, and what they want is their voice, through their vote, free from that kind of elite interference. Just to note, this deep dive drew specifically from material prepared by the Malak team, who advocate for Somalia's path to one person, one vote.